You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome and Happy New Year. This is another edition of Lighthearted Light. This time we're going to revisit an interview that was first heard on this podcast in July 2020 with Canadian lighthouse keeper Karen Zacharuk. With the world's longest coastline and more lakes than the rest of the world combined, Canada is also home to more than 750 lighthouses. There continue to be 49 staffed lighthouses operated by the Government of Canada, 1 in New Brunswick, 25 in British Columbia, and 23 in Newfoundland and Labrador. The light station at Cape Beale is one of the 25 stations that remain staffed on the coast of British Columbia. A resident keeper still maintains the navigation equipment and buildings, monitors the weather and sea conditions, and watches for emergency situations. For more than 15 years, the keeper has been Karen Zacharuk. Let's listen to my conversation with Karen now. What exactly led you to become a lighthouse keeper?
I've always enjoyed being part of the maritime community, and I did grow up in a small fishing village on the north end of Vancouver Island. So I was around water a lot, fishing with my dad and living even in a logging camp out there with my dad for a while. But actually, when my husband and I, when we met in high school, and when we graduated, we bought a sailboat right after graduation, and we lived on the sailboat for 7 years. And we sort of wanted a change in careers. So we took a bridge watchman program, we were planning on going to work on the Coast Guard ships. But when we applied at the Coast Guard base in Victoria, we sort of applied for everything, and relief lightkeeping came up first for myself, and lifeboat stations for my husband. And I sort of always dreamed of living on an island with no cars. So sort of when I first started doing relief lightkeeping, I just fell in love with it. And we had been living on the sailboat for 7 years. So I was sort of ready to start to move into a house and, kind of living sort of a simpler life. And that's sort of how we started. And we've been doing it for now, both of us, for about 20 years. So my husband's with the lifeboats and I'm with light stations, and we sort of got into it.
In this age of automation, when most lighthouses in the entire world have been destaffed, why are some of the Canadian stations still staffed with resident keepers?
Most of the Canada's staffed light stations are obviously in very remote areas of the coast. They're situated in key locations along the coast where, there's treacherous waters and the bad weather conditions as well. And along the BC coast, there's actually only 2 that you can drive to. So the rest are either boat and helicopter or helicopter only access. And in most of these remote areas, the lightkeepers are really the only eyes and ears looking out over our coast. The weather reports that the lightkeepers provide 7 times a day or more, if there's a special weather needed or a weather request, are actually very vital to the mariners and aviators, as well as assisting Environment Canada in forecasting weather. So lightkeepers provide a 24-hour service to the public, and they also provide 24 hours radio watch listening for distress calls. And we assist the Marine Traffic and Communication Services in relaying distress calls that may come from like radio dead zones or mariners just using a handheld radio. So there's a lot of areas there as well that, there's incidents because of the treacherous waters and as the lightkeepers the light stations being in these remote areas, they're a lot of times they're safe havens for mariners and aviators.
Where were you stationed as a keeper before you went to Cape Beale?
So I was just northwest of Port Hardy, 15 miles. That's at the north end of Vancouver Island. And I was at a station called Scarlet Point. I was there for 5 years before I came to Cape Beale. And before that, I did relief lightkeeping for 2 or 3 years. So I was sort of situated. I would just go out for either from anywhere from 3 days to 3 months, I would be at a different light station sort of up and down the coast. So I've been to most of them, but I always thought, if I ever got to be full-time lightkeeper, I would love to. I fell in love with these 2 stations that I've been able to work at full-time. So I've been very lucky that way.
Now, I know Cape Beale is fairly remote, but how remote is it?
It's a 3-minute helicopter ride from Banfield, which is Banfield is our nearest community, and it's 150 people that live there. But Banfield is actually at the end of a 90-kilometer, very rough gravel road. So the nearest town that you can actually drive to on, by a comfortable highway road is Port Alberni. And so we're from Banfield, we're 7 kilometers by hiking, and a lot of that is through the mud. Or we're 5 miles by boat, which depends on the seas. We're sort of the offshore swell, where we have a sort of a lagoon where you can bring a boat into, but it's a very narrow gap that you can get through into the sandy lagoon. And so the seas have to be below about 2.5 meters to be able to ride the wave into the lagoon. So you have to, the offshore swell meeting the lagoon can be pretty treacherous there. So it's a difficult place to get into. Or, of course, by helicopter from Victoria, which is about, I would say it's about a 40-minute flight from Victoria by helicopter.
How do you get in and out normally?
Well, helicopter or lifeboat, a Banfield lifeboat station in Banfield, they can come and get me, or I also have a personal boat, and I have hiked out before as well when we couldn't get a helicopter or a boat in. Yeah, you have to be prepared to get wet and muddy.
Right. You have an assistant keeper, is that correct?
Yes. Him and his wife work here as well. So, when we take vacation, we can only leave when we take vacation. So often when I leave, he can step into my position, and Lolly can step into his position, because there always has to be 2 people working at the station. So
one thing I'm curious about, you mentioned how it's somewhat of an ordeal to get in and out of there. So how do you normally get supplies? Are some of the supplies delivered maybe by helicopter, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so our groceries are delivered once a month with our mail and parcels by helicopter. And so what we do is we place an online order like you would in town with a grocery store, and it's delivered to the Coast Guard base in Victoria. And then from there, it's flown out once a month to the stations all along the coast here. And then other supplies like, fuel for running the generators, or gasoline or lumber, that all comes in by the Coast Guard buoy tenders, and they will bring a workboat and sometimes a fuel barge through our gap here into the lagoon to refuel us. Usually they refuel us every 6 months with diesel, and then bring supplies in as well, like I say, lumber, or if we need a new wheelbarrow or paint or such things like that, they'll bring that in. And then all of our water, of course, is collected off our roof into cisterns. So that's for drinking and washing and such. So in the summertime, we do have to conserve quite a bit if we haven't had a lot of rain. Anything, other supplies like the mail and parcels is usually brought in by helicopter.
How exactly do you get your water supply?
So just when it rains, that's when we get water. So it just comes off our roof, and then we have cisterns. Most of the stations have cisterns in their basement. Half of the basement is converted into one, and mine's sort of a different one. We have it outside under an old foundation that used to be an old duplex. So we have that, a big cistern there. And usually stations have, each house has about an 8,000-gallon cistern, and then it goes through a sandbox and then through multiple filters, and we bleach test it every month. And then it also gets tested by the Coast Guard Health Canada as well to make sure it's safe to drink. And like I say, in the summertime, we do have to conserve quite a bit. Like if we're doing our laundry, we have to save the rinse water for the next wash. It can get that bad. Or lots of the stations also have composting toilets in the house as well, so that the water isn't wasted in the toilet cistern. And there is some stations that can have their water delivered, that, some areas where they don't get as much rainfall as us on the West Coast, but we can't really get our water delivered here. So it's we just have to be careful. Do
you normally get plenty of rain there?
We do, but there has been years, sometimes from April to July where we haven't had any rain at all, where it's been a really dry year, but that's happened a few times. But this year we've been lucky. It's been nice not having to worry about that as much.
It seems rare that you would ever be alone for any stretch of time. Do you ever get lonely there?
That's a quite a common question that I get, especially from people coming on the station that either have never been on a light station or they're just curious about it. And I'm extremely happy here, and I think that makes a big difference. I don't actually get lonely because I feel very connected to this coast, and I feel connected to the villages along the coast. Our Coast Guard and sort of Parks family, in a sense, that come to visit. They come by quite often. I can talk to my family and friends as much as I want, and because I'm lucky here to have good cell phone service, and I get to see them periodically as well. But I guess I've been doing this for so long, it's sort of just become my life, and I'm just busy all the time, crafting, or when I'm not doing my main work, I'm in the evenings or whatever, I just like to pick up a new craft or learn a new craft, and it just. Again, I get inspired being out here, just living amongst nature, and I've never really felt lonely at all.
What sort of crafts do you like to do? I'm just curious.
I love knitting. I paint, woodwork, cooking. I love cooking, sewing. Right now, I'm working on a marine canvas project right now, and just in this rainy weather when we can't be outside doing station work. So I'm filling my time quite often with different crafts. I don't have television, so I listen to the radio quite a bit, and cooking is a big passion, of course, too. So just being able to, eat well and enjoy good food is important for me.
Do you ever find yourself wishing you were closer to a town, or maybe a more major town or a city or anything like that?
No, actually, I'm really, I like going out to town once in a while, but I'm quite happy to get back to the peace and quiet out here. We don't hear vehicles, or, the odd boat will go by or helicopter, we can hear them, but it's very peaceful out here. And I've always grown up in a small area, so I quite enjoy that.
You mentioned eating right. I'm wondering if you're able to grow a lot of your own vegetables and herbs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we have a big garden actually going right now. I can fertilize that with some seaweed that I get off the beach. And we have a garden that we have a greenhouse as well, so we can get vegetables growing throughout the year, like lettuce and green onions and parsley and things like that. But no, that's a big part of being here, is being able to have that fresh food, because with our groceries, usually by the third week into our grocery month, we call the last week, we call it the scurvy week, especially in the winter, because we're out of all the fresh veggies, and it is nice to be able to go down and, sometimes kale will still be growing outside, or celery outside, even it can handle the weather. But it's pretty important to have the fresh stuff, like lettuce and things like that. It only, if you go to the grocery store, it don't only last maybe a week, or like broccoli and stuff like that. So we make a lot of like fermented vegetables, like sauerkraut and kimchi and stuff like that, just to keep things going through the winter. And you sort of learn what lasts longer and what you have to use up first. And then also we get to, we can harvest shellfish off the beach as well throughout the year, most of the time, if there's not PSP. And so we can eat mussels and gooseneck barnacles and urchins and things like that as well.
What kind of wildlife is common around there? And part two of that is, have you had any encounters yourself with dangerous animals there?
Yes. So we're in Pacific Rim National Park. So, there's quite a bit of wildlife here. When I look out, right now there's about 3 gray whales that are feeding just off our reef line. The humpbacks tend to be a little farther out at this time of year. Sea lions, seals and things like that for marine mammals. And then we have resident bears that live we have an estuary down in the lagoon, so they're often there. This morning when I went for a walk, there was 2 of them down there feeding black bears. And then we have wolves. I've seen tracks, and we have a wildlife Parks Canada wildlife camera set up on the trail, which recorded wolves. And I actually last year recorded a mother cougar and her 2 kits walking down the trail together. So there was 3 of them. together. That was a pretty incredible, that was pretty incredible footage. So a few years ago, I think it's about 6 years ago now, my husband was stalked by a cougar here, and it was actually just walked past the doorstep of my assistant keeper's house, and he called us to tell us that the cougar just walked past his doorstep. It was actually after my cat, Cash, and luckily Cash survived, but we went down to see where it might have gone to. And my husband went down first because I had to go and do the weather report, but I guess the cougar was near the helipad and was crouched down, and it was sort of wiggling its rear end like it was going to pounce. And then it lay down, and it stayed there until we had to shoot a bear banger off and scare it off. And it didn't seem to be too afraid of us. So that was a bit of a scary encounter. And, growing up on the North Island, there's so many cougars up there, and all those years that I grew up there, I actually have never seen one in real life until here. And when we go out, we have to carry what we call it's a cougar stick, what my grandfather actually used to make them, and it has sort of a spike on the end, and then it has bear bells and bear spray and a double-edged knife and a bear banger and a whistle all attached to this one stick, so that we're always prepared for any encounters. And then going down to do our weather report, there's been a small bear here ever since my dog hasn't been here anymore. They've decided that they should take over this area. So we have to haze them quite often when we go down to do the weather, because they'll be eating grass near the Stevenson screen or the precipitation gauge, and we have to scare them away to be able to just go and do our weather. So they roam around here very close. So we're just trying to keep them to make sure that they're afraid of us, and they act in the right way. They run off usually when we try to haze them. So it's good behavior.
You mentioned your cat Cash a minute ago, and you were nice enough to email me some pictures of Cash. And first of all, he's a twin of our cat Eddie. They are classic tabby cats, and they look so much alike. It's scary. And
it is.
It's really funny. They look exactly alike. Although Eddie's a house cat, and I'm afraid he needs to go on a diet. Cash, I think, is in better shape. He gets to run around outside and everything. But it's hilarious. You sent me pictures of Cash dressed up in different clothes. It looks like he actually enjoys that. And you say he enjoys greeting people. And he's got a lot of personality. It looks like he really loves life at the light station there.
We call him our site inspector. So when the helicopter lands and he's got his Coast Guard tie and epaulets on there, his collar. He just struts up to the helicopter like he owns the place, and he does the whole kitty customs and inspects everybody. And he's our station ambassador, and he greets all the hikers when they come in, and anybody that comes on station, he's right there making sure that they're all greeted by him.
What are some of your duties that you might happen on a typical day at the light station?
We actually get up at it's either 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning, depending on the time of year, to do our first weather report. And then there's 7 weather reports that we do a day, besides if there's any special weathers involved in that or weather requests. So that's our main part of our job is our weather collections, local marine weather collections. And then of course we're keeping watch on the radio 24 hours a day. When we're outside, we have a handheld radio that we're monitoring all the time. And there might be helicopters coming in or a ship crew coming in to refuel us or, work on some of our equipment. We have a Highline and a derrick equipment. From there, we start our day, in the morning after breakfast. We'll maybe decide, okay, if it's a nice day, we might do some painting. There's a lot of red and white painting here. We're cutting lawns. We're maintaining the generator, doing oil changes, and then fuel filter changes on the derrick engines. We're doing, electrical work. It could be we need to do some minor plumbing or carpentry work, grounds maintenance from cutting our lawns, which takes pretty much all day because we have to do it by with a weed whacker. It's just too steep to be mowing most of it. from cleaning the windows on the cupola of the tower to maintaining our fire pumps, all our safety equipment. There's just, we're cutting back trails that we have around the station just to be able to go and have a lookout for any sort of shoreline search that we have to do. Every day is definitely not the same. So there's always it's a big station, so there's lots of things we have to do around here.
So it doesn't really sound like the pandemic situation in recent months has necessarily affected your life all that much at the Lite station?
Not really. The only thing is we're just not seeing anybody. So, the helicopter's only coming once a month for our groceries, and that's it. We stay off the helicopter pad so they can just put the groceries at the end of the helicopter pad and we can get them from there. There's no hikers because the parks is closed. So there's no hikers coming in, and day-to-day things, everything's still the same as what we would normally be doing. So nothing has changed much for us.
I have one final question for you for bonus points.
Okay.
What have you enjoyed most about your years as a lighthouse keeper?
Oh, I would say just, being the opportunity to work in such a beautiful place, being closely connected with nature and, where the weather and the tides basically determine what you do for the day, being part of a Coast Guard family in a sense, because we're always working closely with the Coast Guard pilots and ships and lifeboats and radio crew and the storm watching. We've had, the biggest seas I've ever seen were a few years ago. We had 63-foot surf on an 11-foot tide, and I've seen water spouts, just beautiful sunsets. Every day is different, so I like that the variability and just how everything's changing all the time, and just living amongst nature. I enjoy that the most.
Well, your love for it certainly comes through. Again, thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Jeremy. And I'm sure we'll be in contact again.
I hope you've enjoyed this look back at my conversation with Karen Zacharuk. Just about every lighthouse in the world is automated, and there are a tiny number of keepers left. 2 of British Columbia's light stations were destaffed in 2024 because of the instability of the land beneath the stations. Here in the U.S., our last official keeper, still employed by the federal government, retired from her position at Boston Light at the end of 2023. Lighthouse keepers like Karen Zacharuk are a reminder of the centuries of devotion of lighthouse keepers in Canada, the U.S., and elsewhere. These people have kept a good light in service of navigation through storms and fair weather, and they deserve to be remembered and celebrated. We will be back next week with a regular episode of Lighthearted. For now, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.